The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
Welcome to another Leon Charney report, and we're talking to you once again from Tel Aviv, Israel, and we're trying to understand the situation, which is very difficult. So we brought on someone who seems to have a real good background to help us understand it. A, he's a member of the Knesset, but B, he's also a doctor of philosophy. So if you put the two together, maybe we get a package that'll help us understand what the prognosis will be for the future of the State of Israel. Our guest today is Dr. Yuval Steinitz. He's a member of the Likud party, and he's also the chairman of the Subcommittee on Defense Planning and Policy. Aside from that, and what's most interesting, I think, about his career, he used to be with Peace Now, which is a very left-wing organization, and now he's on the right side, and he's in the Knesset. So we're going to ask him why he made this metamorphosis. At least he had to change T-shirts, because they all have different T-shirts from left to right. Welcome, Yuval. That's an interesting story. You were a pretty, I wouldn't call it radical, but fervent supporter of Peace Now and an activist with Peace Now, right?
Yes.
So what were you fighting for in those days?
Well, during the 80s and also the beginning of the 90s, I was convinced that if we should do large enough and generous enough compromises or concessions vis-à-vis the Palestinians, including the establishment of an independent Palestinian state in most of the territories, we could create peace and stability and to reduce hostility in the Middle East.
So what happened? Didn't work?
Well, I think it's very clear now. It is even much more clear than in the beginning of the 90s.
Well, when did you see it really going down? When did you say, you know what, I went home at night and I got to talk to my wife?
Let me start by saying that now what I saw is became
reality.
Very evident to most Israelis. You know, for 7 years now, we were aspiring for peace, and we made really beginning with the leadership of the late Yitzhak Rabin, dramatic compromises and concessions vis-à-vis the Palestinians. And we hoped for peace. And we got war. And we hoped to reduce hostility. And the hostility was increased, sharply increased, and also hostilities. So now it is very clear, I think, to almost everybody, that the real struggle is existential struggle. And that the real aim of the Palestinians, or at least the current Palestinian leadership, is not just to establish an independent Palestinian state. Because this was offered by Ehud Barak last summer. He offered an independent Palestinian state on almost 100% of Gaza Strip and 96% of Judea and Samaria of the West Bank, including uprooting most of the settlements. And the response was by Arafat, no, I'm not taking it, unless it includes some elements that will enable the destruction of the Jewish state in the near future. To me, it came a little bit earlier. Already in 1993 and 1994, it became evident, I think, that the Oslo agreements are not peace agreements, but more likely war agreements. And the two major factors were, first, when it became evident that the Palestinian education system, and this is much more important than what Arafat and his people are telling the foreign media abroad, what they're telling their own people, and especially what they're telling their youngest, that the Palestinian education system is shifting not toward peace, but toward greater hostility and very, very serious incitement, anti-Israeli and anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic incitement. And this became evident a year or two after Oslo. The second fact, which is even more important, was that according to Israel's concept of defense and also concept of peace. It was always clear to the Peace Now movement, to the Labour Party, to Meretz, to those people who thought that it is possible to bargain land for peace, land occupied in 1967, for peace with Arab partners, and I was among them. It was always clear that there are two fundamental conditions, two necessary conditions. One, real peace, end of the conflict, end of any further demands beyond the green line, beyond things like this. And two, that those territories that are giving back will be completely demilitarized. And this is due to Israel's tiny, almost impossible geographical dimension. It is such a tiny and minuscule state. Now, in Egypt, with the Egyptians, and I think you were involved.
A little bit.
The Egyptians accepted those two demands. Before we started the withdrawal from Sinai, it was an end to the conflict, at least in this frontier.
Right.
They declared that they will have no further demands beyond what was agreed inside the green line, inside Israel, no right of return or things like that. And secondly, although unwillingly, they accepted the principle of complete demilitarization of Central or East Sinai. In the beginning, they disliked it.
Well, I got to tell you, I beat you to it, because when I saw the Oslo agreements, and I'm for peace, obviously, I said to a friend of mine whose name is Azer Weitzman, these are a disaster, these agreements. And I've said 100 times on this show, but you've never heard it maybe. I said what should have happened at Oslo is A, that the Palestinians would destroy the covenant against the destruction of Israel. B, the Israelis should recognize the Palestinians and stop everybody go to Geneva for 10 years, set up committees to find out how to resolve this. So instead of doing confidence building measures, get confidence first in the committees. Don't give them land and don't give them a military organization, because when you do that, you can't retract it. So I'm not a doctor. Yes, I am a doctor of philosophy now, but I was about 3.5 years ahead of everybody on that, and I'm very much pro-peace. Obviously, I was involved in Camp David. So what you're saying is absolutely correct. And it was a miserable piece of paper that was signed, and historically, in my opinion, will go down in history as one of the greatest dangers that ever hit the state of Israel.
I completely agree with you, but you are emphasizing, and this is, and rightly so, the criticism on Israel and on the way, on the method of those agreements, not about the basic idea.
The concept is fine.
Not about the concept of making peace
Absolutely.
and large concessions vis-a-vis the Palestinians, but about the way we carried it out.
Right.
But you asked me about what changed my mind.
Right.
So I was not so clever. But
No, you're
a year after Oslo, which I supported wholeheartedly, and I supported Rabin in 1992, a year after Oslo, it became evident also that the Palestinians are violating the arms control elements, which are vital. They were vital in Sinai, and all the more so, it is vital for us. It is a necessary condition that Palestinian state, those territories, which are in immediate proximity, in walking distances to Jerusalem, to Tel Aviv, and to most of our military garrisons and airports, will be demilitarized. The Palestinians took upon themselves that commitment, and in Oslo A, they were allowed 9,000 policemen with automatic rifles. A year after, they had already 30,000.
Yeah, they had an army.
30,000. And this should be emphasized, because the Egyptians, and I'm not very satisfied about the way and about the Egyptian attitude, but the Egyptians never, for 25 years, they never tried, for example, to deploy one tanks divisions or infantry divisions or surface-to-air missiles in East Sinai. The Palestinians, 1 year after they gave their commitment, after Rabin and Arafat shook hands on the White House lawn, they already violated the arms control element, and in the last 3 months, there is another dramatic development. Until now, they violated all the arms control elements by number of weapons, by number of guns. 2 months ago, we discovered that they are making systematic efforts to deploy light artillery means, Katyusha rockets, to produce light mortars, and also surface-to-air missiles in immediate proximity to our coastal plain, to some of our most important military airports. And this poses a threat not to our personal security, like terrorism, but to our national security.
All right, Yuval, you, obviously when you're in peace now, you're friendly with the Meretz people. They're intelligent people. They're sophisticated people. They see this as you do, or they understand it as you do. Why do they persist in trying to find a path to Arafat? I don't blame them for trying to find a path for peaceful negotiations. What you had a transference in your mind. Why are these people? Why is Yossi Beilin, and you know he has a right to do what he wants to do. It's a free country, and Sarid and that whole gang of Meretz people. Why are they still strong in their attempt to try and move into a situation with Arafat? When, you know, I'm a lawyer, if you see a guy has no credibility, you put him on a witness stand and you whip him around a little bit, then, you know, he's dismissed as a good witness. There's a lot of credibility that's been destroyed on Arafat's part. What moves the Meretz people in Yossi Beilin?
I think this is a very interesting question. But first, I must admit, and I understand my friends in Meretz, that even for me it was very difficult to change my mind.
Why?
At the beginning, you know, for so many years, I was activist in the Peace Now movement,
right.
And I participated and even organized rallies and protests.
T-shirts.
Yeah, T-shirts. So it was very difficult. In the beginning, you convince yourself that what you see is just obstacles, little obstacles in the right way, in the right road for peace.
Right.
And it's very difficult to change your mind. For me, it was a very difficult year until I had to admit myself that it was wrong, that it is more likely war agreements, and that the existential threat to the state of Israel is increasing because of those agreements. So it is very difficult, also more so to politicians. But I must tell you that many people that supported Meretz, including many writers and journalists and people from the academia, changed their mind.
Absolutely.
And I'll give you one example, very interesting example. 2 weeks before the recent election, the last February elections, when Sharon was elected, I got a phone call from a very famous writer and novelist in Israel. Very known. I won't disclose the name, it was a private conversation. And he phoned me to discuss about other issues at all. And he's very known also to be affiliated, to be a supporter not of Labor, but of Meretz. And he told me, Yuval.
Meretz is a left-wing party of
Yes.
Peace Now in Israel.
Left even than the Labor Party.
Right.
And he told me, Yuval, I'm going to shock you. I'm not going to vote for Ehud Barak. And then immediately added, but I'm not going to vote for Sharon either, because I think I have very strong psychological inhibition against. So I asked him, why? Are you making the same move like I did several years ago from left to right? Or as some of my friends are saying, not moving from left to right, but make a right move. Yes. He said, no, not at all. I'm still supporting the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. I'm still supporting even dismantling most of the Jewish settlements. I don't mind about it. And I'm even ready, and I will be ready in the future, to consider some moderate compromise in Jerusalem. But, he added, and this is extremely important, but, he added, I am not willing to take the risk of a second Jewish catastrophe. Now I'm quoting. I'm not willing to take the risk of a second Jewish catastrophe. And immediately explains that in Barak's proposal last summer, and in Clinton's proposal, or Clinton offering 1 month before he left there, he can identify some elements that might lead to a second Jewish catastrophe in the Middle East. One of the major points that he made, and I think that this is extremely important to clarify, was the issue of the right of return. Now, the factual implications of the right of return are very clear and well elaborated upon, and I don't want to go. It's very clear that if we open the gate, we cannot close it, and Israel will be overflowed by Arab Palestinians, immigration, and this will be the end of the Jewish
Let me
state.
explain that for the audience. Right of return is a concept that the Palestinians want to return to the housing or land or whatever they left in Israel. And if you allow that to happen demographically, you probably wouldn't have a Jewish state in 20 years. So that's a key issue.
Yes, but it is very important to understand it on the principal level, because this shocked many Israelis on the left. This was a major factor in last election's result. You know, as a former activist of the Peace Now, I remember that our best slogan during the 80s, and slogans are always shallow and stupid, but it is must. You cannot do political protest or political campaign without slogans. Our best and most effective slogan was 2 states for 2 people. 2 states for 2 people. One, an Arab-Palestinian state, and homeland for the Palestinian people, and the second, a Jewish state, Israel. So one could expect that if after so many years, Israel, the Israeli government under the leadership of the late Yitzhak Rabin in 1992, 1993, finally accepted a 2-states solution. So exactly like Jews have an automatic right of return, if they like to use it or not, this is another issue. But Jews from the Jewish diaspora...
Everybody except Lansky.
Yes, okay. But in general, Jews from the Jewish diaspora have automatic right of return to the Jewish state, to the state of Israel. So one could expect that the Palestinians will demand a parallel right of return for Arab Palestinians from the Palestinian diaspora in Lebanon, in Syria, in the West, to the Palestinian state. But then Arafat said, no, I demand a right of return for Arab Palestinians, not into the Palestinian homeland, into the Palestinian state, but into the Jewish state, into your part of the land. And this meant, for many Israelis, that the main priority on behalf of the current Palestinian leadership is not the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. This is important, but this is not the first priority. The first priority was, and still is, to destroy the Jewish state. You know, I'll tell you a story. A few weeks ago, I was asked by our foreign ministerial to give a lecture to a large group of European members of parliament from different European countries in Jerusalem, and then to answer questions. So when we came to the questions, one of them from Belgium stood up. He was formerly, I think, the finance minister. Now he's on the position. And asked me, why don't we recognize, at least in principle, the Palestinian right of return? And then we can negotiate the numbers, but in principle, it seems so justified.
Richard Murphy told me that, the former Assistant Secretary of State on my show, said that what the Palestinians are looking for is just this recognition, and then, you know, maybe they'll bring in 30 or 40 families, or 30,000 or 40 families. That's really what they're looking for. That's the same jargon that you'll get.
Yes, so you know what I answered here? Because in principles are also important. So I answer, you know what, I'll address this question, but I have another question before. What's your opinion about the Palestinian demand to freeze the settlements? To freeze the process of sending more and more Jews to settle in the territories. And I hinted that although we are not committed for it by Oslo, all the Israeli government took upon themselves to freeze the building of new settlements, which is a very serious commitment already, and to build only in the already existing settlements. What's your opinion? Of course, it is, you have to accept it. It is very logical. If you are negotiating with the Palestinians about the possibility of an independent Palestinian state in those territories, a national homeland for the Palestinian people, you cannot send at the same time more and more Jews to settle there and to prevent or jeopardize the possibility of a Palestinian state. So I told him, okay, I understood. Now let's go back to your previous question. You know what I told him? I used to be a professor of philosophy until 2 years ago. And our most important weapon as philosophers is always our ability to detect inconsistencies and contradictions and to explore them. So I told him, look, this is an obvious inconsistency. On the one hand, you ask us to stop the process of sending Jews to settle in Judea and Samaria because those territories, or at least large portion of them, large parts of them, might be a Palestinian state. And on the other hand, you ask us to accept the Palestinian demand to start an opposite process of sending Arab Palestinians to settle and to build new Arab settlements inside the Jewish state. It is exceedingly odd.
It's inconsistent.
So there was quiet in the room. And then the head of the delegation said, well, this is very interesting, but we never thought about it in such terms. And this is very typical, that Europeans and also some other people refuse to see, to understand that the main issue here is not the legitimate rights of the Arab, not the legitimate rights of the Arab Palestinians. They were offered an independent state and refused to accept it. The main issue is the legitimate rights of the Jews, the refusal by the Palestinians and by other Arab partners to recognize that justice and equality means the Jews have also some legitimate rights, like the right to preserve the little minuscule national state, national homeland, among all those huge Arab dictatorships. And until they will admit, they will recognize that Jews have also some legitimate rights, we shall have to struggle for our survival.
All right, we got to cut for a break, and we'll come right back, and we will talk to Dr. Yuval Steinitz, the man who went from the left to the right, doctor of philosophy, a member of the Likud faction of the Knesset.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the Backdoor Channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover the mystery of the Kaddish. Available now over iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play. Leon Charney's cantorial CD and Disco Lam. Listen as Charney movingly sings El Moleh Rachamim and Charney's amazing rendition of a disco remix of Adon Olam, all sung in the incredible and individual Charney style. Also listen to the CDs on Rhapsody. Download Leon Charney's cantorial songs and Disco Lam, the disco remix of Adon Olam on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. Or listen in on Rhapsody. All available now.
We're back. I'm talking to Dr. Yuval Steinitz. As I told you before, he was in the Peace Now movement, which is the really extreme left, and now he's in the right wing of the Likud party. At least it's considered the right wing, and he has a doctorate in philosophy, and he's published how many books, Yuval?
4.
4 books, and he's a young guy. I thought he was much older when I spoke with him on the phone. Yuval, Arik Sharon, he is your prime minister of the Likud party. I know that you have been in the past a big supporter of Bibi Netanyahu. Are you satisfied with Arik Sharon to date?
Well, some things could be done better, but generally I'm very satisfied. I think he is much better than our previous Prime Minister, Ehud Barak. And I think that it is very important to have in such a real time of crisis a national unity government, and I support him. But it is true, I admit that in the past and most probably also in the future, it is most likely that I'll support Netanyahu. And I think that today it is becoming more and more evident how successful, good and successful Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was.
In what way? I mean, he signed the Y agreements, which probably were not making you very excited. He had made promises that he would not meet with Yasser Arafat. He did, you know, it's a political move. I'm not critical. These are things that people would point out about Bibi at this point. And why he lost, you know, why did he lose the election?
Well, it's very bad that he lost the elections. But first about the Y River Agreement, or memorandum, right. I think it was, with all the criticism, I think it was a very good agreement. And I think that Bibi succeeded to make some remedies and to change the method of Oslo in the Y River Agreement. Secondly, I think that the best way to judge, when it's possible, is to judge by results. And the result was, after 3 years, that in the last 2 years, he achieved a complete calm and stability inside Israel and in the Middle East. Terrorist activity was completely stopped. At the first year, it was reduced, but there were some occasions.
How do you do that?
But the second and third year, there was complete cessation of violence, and although the economy became very strong during his time.
All right, Yuval, how did he stop the terrorism? How could he do something that Sharon couldn't do?
Well, first, I think it is too early to judge. Sharon is our prime minister only 3 months,
right?
And he got a very difficult situation.
Terrible, and unfortunately, a lot of people are getting killed.
Yes, so I think it is too early to judge. We might try to judge his success or failure half a year from now, after a year, but not after 2 or 3 months. I think Bibi was very successful by producing a very severe pressure on the Palestinian Authority, not just by putting military threats and not just by putting economic sanctions, but also by some additional, very sophisticated maneuvers that put Yasser Arafat regime under a real threat and almost on the verge of collapse. And this is the only method.
Yeah,
this is the only method.
What were those methods?
Well, it's difficult to explain. I mean, first he was really putting a very strong commitment to act, and to act to use military force if terrorism will continue. But second, I think that I'll give you just a clue because it's very a delicate issue. I think that the realization of Sheikh Yassin, the leader of the Hamas, from jail, 1 year after Bibi came to power, was a very serious turning point. And if you check very carefully, you see that since the realization of Sheikh Yassin, for 3 years, there was no one successful terrorist attack inside Israel. There was no one suicide bombing attacks that succeeded.
So wait, you're saying because the release of Sheikh Yassin, it calmed down the whole Palestinian terrorists?
This was one, but very important factor.
Why would that work like that?
I'll just mention that the realization of Sheikh Yassin from jail put enormous pressure on Yasser Arafat and made it very clear, I think, to the Palestinian Authority that if violence will continue, Israel will not do any effort to secure and to preserve the Palestinian Authority.
So you're saying, in a sense, Sheikh Yassin was a competitor to Arafat because he is a popular character, and therefore he could jeopardize Arafat's control over the Palestinian Authority?
Let's put it, if you like, I can elaborate a little bit, and this is only my analysis. I think that during the time of Rabin and Peres, and also the first year of Netanyahu, there was some kind of tacit, implicit understanding between Israel and the Palestinian Authority and Yasser Arafat. You, Yasser Arafat, you will prevent the Hamas from putting a terrorist threat on us, and we shall prevent the political arm of the Hamas to put a political threat on you. And therefore, we shall preserve Sheikh Yassin in jail, and so on. Bibi made it very clear that if Arafat is not completely fulfill his commitment to prevent the Hamas and Jihad Islamic to carry out terrorist attacks in Israel, we will not be so sensitive to Arafat's survival.
So you would destabilize him?
Yes. At least we won't take any measures to stabilize his regime.
Have you met Arafat?
Never.
You interested in meeting him?
Well, maybe once in the future, if there will be a complete change in his attitude, although it's very difficult to believe. In the past, I met some senior Palestinian leaders that belonged to the PLO during the 80s and the beginning of the 90s. And I must say that some of them were very positive and very promising concerning the peace process and also concerning the democratic future of the Palestinian entity or state when it will be established. All those aspirations or wishful thinkings, and I'm very frustrated to acknowledge it, were discovered as wishful thinking.
All right, we're talking now, it's the 20th of June, or the 21st of June. There have been a tremendous amount of settlers being killed here, tremendous. Every day we see in the paper another settler. What can Arik Sharon do now? I mean, there is a perception in the world, that if the settlers, or part of the settlers were removed, all this violence would cease. What's your feeling? On the other hand, the settlers are now engaging in demonstrations in front of the Prime Minister's house on a daily basis. And I understand from one of my sources that they intend to make that a permanent place, just to keep pressure on Sharon, who in the past was the hero of the settlers. What does he do now?
I think he's in a very delicate and difficult situation. But let me start by saying that it should be very clear by now that the removal of the settlements will not heal the problem and will not stop violence. Why? Because Ehud Barak last summer proposed to Yasser Arafat an independent Palestinian state, and he proposed also to uproot, to dismantle most of the Jewish settlements in the territories. And the answer was no. And the starting of a very long way of violence. So the settlements is not the problem. As I mentioned before, it's important to emphasize, the problem is a persistent Palestinians' refusal to recognize that Jews have some legitimate rights and to recognize Israel's existence. By the way, it's important to mention that 7 years after Rabin and Arafat shook hands on the White House lawn and spoke about mutual recognition, Israel is never being depicted on official Palestinian maps and on maps in textbook for Palestinian pupils in elementary and secondary schools. Israel is not on the map. It's just Palestine, including Tel Aviv, or the entire land is Palestine.
Right, Yuval.
But now let me please, with your permission, address your question directly. I warned Sharon that Arafat might use or abuse the ceasefire in order to make two maneuvers that will put us in a very delicate and difficult position. One will be to reduce violence and to shift it only to the settlers. And then if violence will not be ended but dramatically reduced, it will be very difficult to react because everybody will ask us, well, now you are going to a very serious reaction, retaliation. Now you are putting in danger all the region. Now that we already see a dramatic improvement, and then we shall have to suffer a low rate of violence, and terrible violence, like today. The second is even more serious. Yasser Arafat will reduce violence for several weeks or months, and then he will resume it. But then it will be much easier for him to put the blame on Israel and on Ariel Sharon's rigidity. No, this law of attrition began when Barak was in power, Ehud Barak. And immediately after he offered dramatic and unexpected concessions vis-a-vis the Palestinians. Even Shimon Peres was shocked. But now he will resume violence after a short break when Sharon is Israel's Prime Minister, and the world media will be eager to accept it that this time it is because Sharon's rigidity and because the fact that he is not reiterating Barak's generous proposals.
But so, what do you think he should do? Should he go to war immediately against the Palestinians? Should he have gone into an immediate offensive against the Palestinians after the Dolphinarium incident? Were these classical mistakes in your opinion? And what do you do today?
Yes, first I think it was a mistake not to go to a serious strike against the Palestinian Authority, not the Palestinian people, but the Palestinian regime.
Right.
After this terrible terrorist attack in the Dolphinarium. And I think that this is the only method to resume our deterrence capacity and to achieve a real cessation of violence vis-a-vis the Palestinians. And it is very difficult for me to advise him today. We are trapped by Yasser Arafat in a very delicate situation. And I think that it will be inevitable in the near future, inevitable in the near future not to strike back and to continue to give a mandate, actually, to the Palestinians to kill our people and to violate all the elements of Oslo. And of the
all right, Yuval, let's assume you make a strong attack on the Palestinian Authority, not the people, but the authority, and you wipe out their military capacity and their mortars and whatever they have running now. What do you do after that? What happens to the Palestinian people? Where does it go? Where is the problem?
It is difficult to say. But even if we will be back to the negotiation table in the future, and I hope we shall be back to the negotiation table, hopefully with a new and more moderate and more reasonable Palestinian leadership, it is very important how we approach the negotiating table. Will we approach the negotiation table when they deter us and that the possibility, the potential of resuming violence and terror in case of crisis and disagreements is there? Or if we are going back to the negotiation table after we succeeded to deter the Palestinians and after it was made very clear that the price of violence and terrorism is impossible for the Palestinians to afford, and this is not a tool anymore in the negotiation process. This is extremely important.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed
winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the backdoor channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover the mystery of the Kaddish. Available now over iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play. Leon Charney's cantorial CD in Disco Lam. Listen as Charney movingly sings El Moleh Rachamim and Charney's amazing rendition of a disco remix of Adon Olam, all sung in the incredible and individual Charney style. Also listen to the CDs on Rhapsody. Download Leon Charney's cantorial songs in Disco Lam, the disco remix of Adon Olam on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. Or listen in on Rhapsody. All available now.
Can the Israeli government move without the implied approval of the United States? Do they need George Bush, in a sense, to say it's okay to make the strike? Or can they do it without that assent?
Well, it should not be explicit, but I think it is very clear also to the new administration in the United States. And I just came back 2 weeks ago from a very long trip to Washington and New York, in which I met many congressmen and also people from the Pentagon and the White House. I think it is already very clear that Israel cannot continue to ignore all the violations and all the threats made by the Palestinian Authority to the personal security of the people of Israel and to the national security and actually the national existence of Israel. It cannot go like this too long. And it is also very clear that we shall have to wait, most probably, to a new Palestinian leadership and to a new atmosphere in the Middle East in order to try to achieve a reasonable settlement, final settlement between us and the Palestinians. And when I'm saying reasonable, it means that we shall preserve the minimal conditions that will enable us to survive and to defend ourselves in this difficult region. That the Palestinians will accept, like the Egyptians in Sinai, the principle of complete demilitarization, although it is not easy for them. That they will accept our demand to have minimal security zones, especially on Western Samaria, the first line of hills overlooking the Tel Aviv region and the coastal plain, and that they will accept our demand to real peace. And real peace means mutual recognition. They have to drop their demand to the right of return. They will have the Palestinian entity or state, and we shall have Israel as a Jewish state, and no side will continue to have fundamental demands on the land and on the territory that belong to the other side. This is the real essence of compromise, that you recognize the legitimate right of the other side, although you have justified demand.
So you think really the only way to stop terrorism is to show the military might of Israel, and that Israel really has to go in there, and if this these settlers or anybody or these suicide bombers continue, you really have to go in and wipe out the Palestinian Authority and try to see a new regime come to being, and then you can
new leadership,
new leadership, and then you negotiate them. You don't personally have any problem with the Palestinian state so long as they conform with what you said, do you?
Yeah, no. Well, of course I have problems, and it's very painful to give, and we already gave some parts of our historical homeland, the only land that that belonged to us and belonged to us. But I'm ready to make concessions and compromises in order to achieve some kind of peace and coexistence, but not to commit suicide, not to put Israel's national security and actually Israel's existence under a real threat. This cannot be done, this shouldn't be done, and we have to wait until we shall be offered a reasonable agreement. If we shall be offered a reasonable agreement by the other side, we shall be very generous, including some additional territorial concessions.
So you don't see a quick fix here. You think this situation can go on for a long period of time?
Yes, well, you know, it is very frustrating.
Sure.
But it's better to face reality. For 8 years now, we were very, very dedicated to achieve peace with the Palestinians. And we already made very dramatic concessions, including some dramatic territorial concessions. And we achieved less and less security, war instead of peace, terrorism, and more incitement and hostility.
All right, we got about 1 minute. When you talk to your friends in there at Sarid and you know, these, who else runs, I don't even know the Meretz party so well. Ron Cohen. All right, what do they think should be done today? You know, just very quickly, where are they coming? Because they're intelligent people.
Well, I would say that when professional politicians appearing on TV, they always have answers. But in private discussions, most of us, including most people on Meretz, are quite confused and quite frustrated.
Are they angry at you that you switch sides in a sense?
No, not most of them. On the opposite, I think that usually, of course, some people might be angry and this is stupid, but usually they respect it. And as one journalist told me, she is very affiliated to Meretz, several months ago, she told me, Yuval, you know, you are the only member of the Likud that I and my friend in Meretz are really willing to listen to it. So I asked her why. I said, first, it is usually interesting, and second, you are not hostile, and this is very helpful.
Third, you're Jewish. We got to get out. Thank you, Dr. Yuval Steinitz. This is what's happening in Israel. You've heard it now from a philosopher, a man who went from left to right, and he gave you an analysis of where it's going. The problem is that there are no quick answers here, and I think the people of Israel understand that, and they're going to have to live with that for a time. I think Arik Sharon is under some pressure from the settlers, and on the other hand, I think the United States is trying to exert some pressure now, and they thought they would stay out of it, but they're coming in, and Colin Powell is coming here next week, and Sharon is visiting the United States with George Bush next week. We'll see you next week.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the Backdoor Channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening, a book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover the mystery of the Kaddish. Available now over iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play. Leon Charney's cantorial CD and Disco Lam. Listen as Charney movingly sings El Moleh Rachamim and Charney's amazing rendition of a disco remix of Adon Olam, all sung in the incredible and individual Charney style. Also listen to the CDs on Rhapsody. Download Leon Charney's cantorial songs and Disco Lam, the disco remix of Adon Olam on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. Or listen in on Rhapsody. All available now.